Today's video is sponsored by Roll for Combat and their Battle Zoo Bestiary for D&D 5e and Pathfinder Kickstarter, live now. This may be the most exciting D&D supplement I've ever seen. I'm a massive fan of the Monster Hunter games, and now I can live out the fantasy of hunting creatures to craft loot at my dinner table. This book introduces 114 new monsters. Yes, 114. And rules for monster materials which will allow you to turn those monster parts into usable gear, like weapons, armor, shields, and more. I've always wanted a great D&D system for this. My next campaign will be only hunting and crafting. But as excited as I am for monster hunting, Battle Zoo Bestiary also introduces a new subclass, Monster Mage, that has the ability to steal abilities from monsters. Hunt monsters for spells and gear? Where have you been all my life? And to top it off, the Kickstarter is coming in big with 3 books, a Dragon Ancestry book, and an adventure for level 1 through 10. Check out www.kickstarter.rollforcombat.com and let's go monster hunting. And now, what you're here for. When DM blew players' minds, shattering their understanding of the entire campaign. Hi everyone, All Things D&D is back with another story. This story has one of the coolest settings ever. I may just use this for a one-shot or campaign later. Listen to this story and see if you can figure out what's happening before the big reveal. Hi, I'm a forever DM, and I have absolutely no problem with that. I'm passionate about D&D and the stories that spawn from it. I enjoy lurking and reading community stories, taking inspiration and applying it to the betterment of my own D&D campaigns. I've had a story up my sleeve for some time, and I feel confident enough now to share it. This one is going to be a long one, so grab yourself a snack and enjoy. The campaign was known as the Shifting Seas. The campaign is now finished, and simply thinking of the name brings in a wave of nostalgic memories and stories. Easily the highlight of the campaign was this story. The world of the Shifting Seas is as follows. Majority of the world is covered in an endlessly deep ocean. Dotting the ever-extending blue are small islands. These islands house all civilizations in the world. However, there's a strange occurrence within the world of the Shifting Seas. The islands are split into 2 categories, True and Husk. True islands are as any normal island should be. However, Husk islands are an enigma. Every week a worldwide event known as the Shift occurs. During the Shift, all Husk islands above the water are dragged down and disappear forever. New Husk islands appear in other places of the world. The inhabitants of the world are similarly split into 2 categories, True and Husk. True people are those who reside on the True islands, doing whatever it is that they do. Husks reside on the Husk islands. At the beginning of the campaign, I made it clear to my players that Husks always stay on Husk Islands. There has never been a recorded case of a Husk leaving its Husk Island. Husks, however, are not mindless beings. They are people who have emotions, beliefs, and interesting stories. In every Husk Island that's inhabited by a civilization, there's a story accompanied with it that justifies its place in the world, as if it's always been there. There have been Husk Islands that have histories with other True islands. The inhabitants of the Husk Islands believe this history. However, the rest of the world, the Trues, understand that this history is nothing more than a fabrication. That this supposed island with rich history only in fact came into existence this week, and next week it'll be gone. As a result, Husks are viewed as subhuman compared to everyone else. There's even a faction of pirates who solely target Husks. They invade the island and plunder it of everything with value. Nobody really cares about these horrible actions. The Husks are pillaged, killed, they have horrible things done to them with no consequence. Why would there be any consequence? The Husks will simply disappear after a week anyway. This was essentially the base building blocks for the campaign. Along the way, my players would venture throughout the world, visiting Husk Islands and True Islands, and would eventually uncover a horrifying truth about the nature of the very world. Here, we mark the beginning of the actual campaign. 3 men stand in front of a quest board at a local tavern on the island of Point Jack. The first is Joe DeHaan, a woodsman whose simple hunter and gatherer lifestyle with his wife was shattered when the forest he resided in was burnt to the ground, and his wife was killed by a red dragon. The second is Shin Kaze, more commonly known as Ryu, a gangster working for the worldwide shadow organization, the Mizoku. The last is Scythe, a man named after his weapon, an amnesiac whose first memory is waking on the empty beach of an island that sits halfway across the world. These men have never met each other before, but when looking upon the quest board, the difficulty of the available quests encouraged the 3 men to join forces. So began the quest of our heroes. The quest in question that they chose was to track down a young man who had sliced the belly of the local priest open and bring him in for execution. After tracking down the young man, the players learned his story. His name was Amon Ivo, and his reason for killing the priest was sympathetic. Instead of bringing him in, the players instead vowed to sneak Amon off of the island and away from his persecution. They succeeded and gained an ally who would accompany the party for some time and eventually become key in entangling the mysteries of the world. This would happen when the players visited their first Husk Island, known as Indeem. Indeem was a Husk Island populated entirely by primitive, warring, dragonborn tribes. Each tribe had an in-depth history that seamlessly intertwined with other true islands. Despite this, my players understood that this history was false. Each tribe wanted help to conquer the other tribes, and were offering different things in return. The players chose to ally with the tribe that promised the hand of their princess, a white dragonborn named Faerina for Hussar, in marriage. The players fought for this tribe fueled by the promise of waifu. Eventually, they had accomplished their task, but the shift would be occurring that night, and they did not want to be on the island when it started. The players snatched the princess and began to retreat to their ship as the sun began to set. They made it onto their ship with the princess and looked back to the dock. Their companion, Amon Ivo, was sprinting right behind them. The players encouraged Amon to hurry, however he did not make it in time. Amon suddenly stopped in his tracks, standing extremely still, his gaze empty. The Husk Island began to sink into the ocean, and Amon stood motionless as the water slowly swallowed him whole. At that moment, I told my players to roll a wisdom saving throw. The throw was impossible to succeed. After all of them rolled, I began to inform them that their characters' minds were being altered. Faerina, the Husk dragonborn princess that came with them on the ship, was now a true, someone who the players found adrift at sea. Amon, however, was a Husk on the island of Indeem. The players met Amon on Indeem and saw him sink into the ocean with the island, just like any other Husk. The player characters did not think anything was out of the ordinary. However, the players knew what they had just seen. That true people are capable of becoming Husks, and Husk people are capable of becoming true. This event was a revelation, but it's not the mind-blowing event that I promised. That event is soon to come. This event laid the foundation for what's to come, the fourth wall-breaking reveal that shattered my players' expectations. The next piece of the puzzle came into view from the sea once again, a Husk Island. The players were sitting on a beach when the shift occurred. Off in the distance, they could see a Husk Island rising from the waves, only this one was different. It began to rise further upwards, rising past the sea and into the sky. However, this island was not floating, no. It was supported by a thick stem that ran down beneath the waves. My players ventured onto this island. The island was uninhabited for the most part. However, it had a complex cave system. The party delved through the cave and eventually came upon some kind of device. It was currently dormant. They all discussed whether or not they should activate the device. They all eventually agreed that if nothing was ventured, nothing was gained. Sure of consequences, but unsure of what they might be, the players activated the device. The entire island shook, and the players began to race back out of the cave and off of the island. However, when they exited the cave, the entire island turned and became vertical, falling towards the water below. The players held on for dear life, and everything went black. The player awoke a week later, rescued by allies. The first thing they wanted to know was what happened to that Husk Island, and their allies informed them that the island was no longer a Husk. The shift had already occurred. However, that island did not sink into the ocean, unlike all the others. The Husk Island had become permanent, true, and it was all because of the players. The device that they activated had caused the stem that raised the island to be severed. The stem was what made the Husk Island a Husk Island. A thought suddenly came over the players. If a Husk Island can become true, what of the other true islands? Were they Husks at one point? They ventured out to determine their hypothesis. In a submarine, they ventured down the side of one island. Eventually, the island's side sloped inwards on itself, and the players found themselves at the underside of the island. The island wasn't connected to any solid ground. It was just floating in the water like a piece of your cookie that tragically broke off and landed in your milk. And to my players' horror, they found a broken stem sticking out from the underside of the island. This revelation created a rift between the players. One of them came to the realization that all of the atrocities committed against the Husks, the pirates, the pillaging, the discrimination, it was all against Husks committed by Husks. The other two acknowledged this, however still argued that there was still a differentiation between the two groups. Husks were still Husks, and Trues were still Trues. Husks will come and go, but Trues are here to stay. The first player refuted again, stating the case of Amon. Who's a Husk? Who is a True? Anybody has the capability to become both. In fact, the world was probably full of these cases. People venturing onto Husk Islands, only to be dragged down into the water and be remembered as Husks, and Husks who ventured off of their island to be acknowledged as True. Oh boy, this player didn't know just how right they were. But they wouldn't come to realize this until it all came together. All the mysteries, the revelations. The players had found out the secret of the Husk Islands. However, there was still just one more piece of the puzzle that would absolutely blow my players' minds. The next shift, there was another peculiar island. The island's presence was causing a stir amongst the entire world. The island was another island with inhabitants, rich history intertwining with the rest of the world. It was another whole place to explore. However, there was one unsettling aspect of it. On the island was a monk who resided in solitude at the peak of the island's tallest mountain. This monk apparently knew that he, his island, and everyone on it was a husk. This monk had the players' full attention. They raced to the island, certain that this monk would provide the players with another revelation that would expand their understanding of the world. When the players stood before the monk, they were shaking in anticipation. The monk was shriveled and anorexic. His skin was rotting and his eyes had gone foul like rotten raisins. However, the monk took one look at the players and smiled. He knew exactly what they were after. Answers. What the players heard next blew their minds. Has there ever been a moment in which your life seemed to be split in two? A point in time that separates your backstory from your actual story. Confused, the players asked what he meant. A gangster, a woodsman, and a lost soul. Is that really who you are? No, you are none of those things. You are simply three souls who looked upon a quest bulletin board. The players were called back to the first session, the meeting of their characters and the beginning of everything, but they still couldn't ascertain what the monk was implying. That was when the monk put it simply. You are husks. The monk finished and left the players at that. Most of the players were left confused. However, one of them realized. He began to freak out at the realization and told the rest that they have to return to Point Jack, the island in which they started on. The players all raced to Point Jack. They found that it wasn't there. Point Jack was a husk island just like any other husk island. A moment in which your life is split in two. A point in time that separates your backstory from your actual story. Within D&D, that would be those first moments. The players all sitting at their table, eager to begin a new campaign. The stories that they had each written up for their characters, that was all in the past now. Their characters had lived, and were now ready to live through a new era of their lives, a new story. But not for my players. Their characters hadn't lived at all. The beginning of the first session where I told the players what was in front of their eyes, a quest board. It was no ordinary quest board. It was the first thing that the player characters had ever laid their eyes on. In that very moment, the player characters came into existence, when the shift ushered them life. My players that session loved how crazy of a twist that was. I myself am very proud of it to this day. Who's to say when the story truly begins? When you scratch down your character's backstory, after you introduce yourself to the rest of the party, pretty brilliant stuff by the DM here. I love a well-executed twist. Makes you question what's real. Please let us know what you think and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Things D&D. Our videos are posted every Tuesday and Friday, so stay tuned for more amazing Dungeons & Dragons content.